Hello everyone, my name is Jeff. I am a developer at the project. Currently, I started the webinar a bit early. That's just so people know that they get the notification that it started and they can enter the room. I have around 20 people registered for this webinar. There's about 5 in the room right now, so I'm going to be waiting until more people enter the room. Yeah, so I'm basically a developer at Bit Project, and we're developing these webinars to educate students like you how to use APIs, just computer science stuff in general, while we're expanding to other branches of STEM, such as biology engineering, and I'll link the website into the chat. So if anyone's interested, they can click on the link and check it out. It's really cool, the stuff we're doing. You can also apply. We're currently centered in UC Davis. So yeah. Let me pull up my presentation. And as you can see, today our webinar is focused on sentiment analysis, and we're going to be using Twitter's API for this. This is a continuation of our Twitter series that we've been doing. So a lot of the code we talk about in this webinar will be built on the code that was written in the previous series. So if you haven't seen those, you should definitely check it out because you're going to need a lot of the framework that the previous webinars have set up. Okay, that's around enough people, enough waiting. Let's get on with the webinar. So, by the way, if you have any questions, please feel free to type it into the chat because I can see any questions you all might have, and I'll be for sure to answer them. Also, throughout the webinar, I'll be putting in a poll into the chat. It's basically going to be asking, are you ready to move on? And please vote. If you're not ready to move on, please press no, because that way I know if I'm going too fast or if I'm going too slow. It really helps me know the pace of which I'm going through the slides. Okay. On to the webinar. So sentiment analysis is a branch of natural language processing, NLP, and it's basically where you take text and you feed it into an algorithm, and the algorithm is able to extract information from the text. And here I have a really cool picture here. It's basically text feeding into an algorithm, and the algorithm extracts information from the text, and it's able to give feedback, such as if the language is positive, if there's a negative tone. And NLP is very, very cool, and it's used everywhere, like Amazon Alexa, the whole chat system. It's developed on using NLP, so it's really prominent in today's industry. So NLP, or just sentiment analysis in general, it's very complicated, and you need an incredibly intense algorithm that needs to be developed, tested, and luckily we have modules that we can use to do this work for us. And one of the modules that I want to talk about, it's TextBlog. Why don't you guys go ahead and install it right now? It's just go into your terminal, pip install TextBlog. It's relatively simple. And in our Python file, our program, we are going to do from TextBlog, import TextBlog, and then we're also going to import the module re, and So TextBlog is responsible for all of our sentiment analysis that's going on. Re is going to be really helpful when it comes to formatting our data and cleaning it up. So we'll be using that a lot, which is very important. Also, you should be seeing a button on your screen. It's basically TextBlog documentation. It says that TextBlog documentation. If you click the button, then it'll basically link you to TextBlog's documentation, and from there you can read all about the different features and tools it has that you can use. Yeah, like most modules, it's important to read the API because this webinar we won't be going through all of the function or all of the functionality of TextBlog, but it's something for you to explore. Okay, I took off the button. Yeah, moving on to the actual code now. So the first thing we want to do is write a function called clean tweet. And the purpose of this function is to take in a tweet and remove any punctuation, any like colons, semicolons, apostrophes. Remove all of that because sentiment analysis is like really complicated, and the simpler the text is, the more efficient our text bubble will be when pulling out information. If the tweet is if the tweet has a bunch of quotation marks, hyperlinks, forward slashes, backward slashes, it doesn't really help with interpreting the meaning of the sentence or of the text, right? So what we'll be doing is removing all of this. Oops, let me go back. And again, we'll be using the re module for this. And I want you to copy this function exactly word for word. It's a bunch of text that you're going to need. So I have put in the poll ready to move on. If please vote once you have added this function to the program. And I will wait. Garrett Mark in the chat asks, are we going to be working with just Python? Yeah, it's just like in the other webinars, this webinar is going to be purely in Python. So you don't need to worry about like any other languages like C, C++. It's just going to be Python, which is really nice actually. Okay, seems like everyone is ready to move on, so we'll continue. Again, feel free to add any questions. So now we're going to get to the analyzing the tweets pretty much, right? So we're going to write another function. It's going to be called Analyse Sentiment. And we will be calling, or it's going to have two parameters, itself and the tweet we want to analyze. And then we'll be using TextBlog to analyze it pretty much. So it'll be an analysis equals TextBlog self.clean tweet. You can see, and we could basically call our clean tweet function here. Yeah, so right now we're just setting up our functions, and later on we'll be calling them. So TextBlog, or our analysis value right over here, is going to return a number. It's going to be a rational integer, negative or positive. And this number basically is going to tell us how the public perception of the tweet. So if, for example, there was a controversial tweet, then and most people did not like it, then a negative number will be returned, and that will tell us whether the public did not like the tweet. And so you can get a positive number, 0, or a negative number. Positive number, as it might suggest, means that the public overall did approve of the tweet. If a 0 is returned, then that means TextBlog could not extract any meaningful information, and this basically means that TextBlog couldn't tell whether the reaction of the tweet was positive or negative, and if it was negative, then that means the public did not like the tweet. Emily Tran in the chat is asking whether the size of the number determines how much the public approves or disapproves of the tweet. And yes, that would be correct. For example, if analysis was returned, or 100 was returned for one tweet versus a tweet that only returned a 10's value, right? Then that means that the tweet that got 100 was approved much higher, or approved much more than the tweet that received a 10. And now we are going to add on to our Analyse Sentiment function. So like I mentioned before, you can get 3 different values: a positive number, a negative number, or 0. We're going to simplify this a lot further down and simply limit it to 1, 0, -1. And when we incorporate this data into our data frame, this is going to be helpful because it really simplifies down the information. We don't really care, or I mean, you might care, but in this case, it's a lot simpler just to know how the tweet was received, negative or positive. We don't really need to know the magnitude of the number, right? So if analysis.sentiment.polarity, this is going to, so this is going to be greater than 0. And again, you'll learn more about if you read TextBlog's documentation, you'll learn more about what these represent, but they just basically represent how the public perceives the tweet. So if it's going to be greater than 0, then return 1, and 1 is a positive number, so we know that the tweet was approved of. If it equals 0, then that means it couldn't return 0, which means it couldn't you couldn't extract any meaningful information out of it. And if it's not greater than 0 and it's not equal to 0, then it must be below 0. So in our else statement, we simply put return -1. And so now we'll be adding on to our DataFrame function. We basically have done most of the work. We just need to add on to our DataFrame. And again, this should have already been, your DataFrame should have been already created, and we're just adding on to it now. And you can do this with this line of code here. And once this is done, if you run your program now, you should see an extra column with a bunch of 1s, 0s, and -1s. But other than that, I'm going to be adding the poll again. So at this point, feel free to answer. But at this point, we're basically done with this this webinar. Again, this was just an introduction to, or this is basically sentiment analysis using Shredder's API. It'll be explored much more deeply when the NLP or when we get into natural language processing. But yeah, I just wanted to show you all how this works. If you have any questions, or I'll be ending the webinar now, but if you have any questions, please type them into the chat and I'll stay and answer. If there's any problems with your function, it's not loading as intended, you can send me the code and I'll take a look at it. All right, thank you all for coming. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you all for the next webinar. All right, session.